Hello and welcome. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and coming up in the next hour, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to be sworn in over the weekend for a landmark third time. Leaders from neighbouring nations are invited for the ceremony. The Netherlands kicks off the 27-nation European Union elections on Thursday, which will go on till the 9th of June. It's a crucial pole battle in the ascent of the far-right forces in Europe. And events in France and the UK mark the 80th anniversary of the Allied invasion of France in the Second World War. US President Joe Biden says in Normandy that the fight for Ukraine echoes the struggle for freedom on D-Day. But first up, hectic parleys have been underway in India for government formation. Senior BJP leaders met at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's residence in New Delhi. On the other hand, NDA leaders have started arriving in New Delhi for the NDA's meeting on Friday as well. Following the conclusion of the elections, the Election Commission of India submitted the list of newly elected members to the 18th Lok Sabha to India's President Draupadi Murmu.
National Democratic Alliance set in motion the government formation efforts under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Senior BJP leaders including Union Ministers Amit Shah and Rajnath Singh attended crucial meeting at PM's residence in New Delhi on Thursday. NDA lawmakers are scheduled to meet on Friday at Parliament Central Hall, with the new government likely to be sworn in over the weekend. Newly elected members of Parliament of BJP and NDA continued arriving in New Delhi on Thursday. On the other hand, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi held a press conference in New Delhi.
What is the connection between the BJP, the fake exit pollsters, and the dubious foreign investors, who invested one day before the exit polls were announced and made a huge profit at the cost of 5 crore families?
After his comments, BJP slammed Rahul Gandhi over his remarks on stock market.
देश के निवेशक जानते हैं कि पिछले 10 वर्ष के सफलतापूर्वक मोदी सरकार के कार्यकाल में हमारा मार्केट कैप पहली बार $5 ट्रिलियन से अधिक हुआ है.
Rift is being witnessed among Indie bloc members. Aam Aadmi Party said it will not fight assembly polls in alliance with Congress.
देखिए, अलायंस पहले से ये बहुत साफ है कि ये अलायंस लोकसभा चुनाव के लिए था. लोकसभा चुनाव हमने ईमानदारी से मिलकर के लड़ा है. दिल्ली जो विधानसभा का चुनाव है उसके लिए देश भर में कोई गठबंधन नहीं है.
Following completion of election, the Chief Election Commissioner Rajiv Kumar called on President Draupadi Murmu and submitted the list of newly elected members to the 18th Lok Sabha to the President.
जब चुनाव पूर्ण हो गया तो जितनी भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी से रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर्स ने अपने अपने सर्टिफिकेट्स हमें भेजे, उसको एक लिस्ट करके पूरी नोटिफिकेशन इशू करके वो हमने महामहिम राष्ट्रपति जी को अभी दिया. उसके बेसिस पर अब 18th लोकसभा का गठन की प्रक्रिया हमारी तरफ से पूरी हो गई.
President commended hundreds of millions of voters who participated in the election process in such large numbers. Afterwards, the Chief Election Commissioner, along with other officials, paid a visit to Rajghat to seek blessings of the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, after successful conduct of General Elections 2024. Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
So what's going to happen next in terms of the government formation process? Let's find that out. DD India's Kriti Vadhera joins us from the newsroom. Kriti, what can you tell us, just outside in fact the newsroom, Kriti, what can you tell us about all the meetings that took place today? Has the shape and form of the next 3.0 Modi government, the BJP-led NDA government, has that been finalized, and when exactly is the swearing in?
Well, good evening, Gautam. And yes, to tell you, the weather in Delhi is quite hot and humid, and the same remained with the high-profile political meetings which happened today in New Delhi. The very first thing in morning we witnessed was the internal core, group meeting of Bharatiya Janata Party at the National President JP Nadda's residence, and all such internal discussion to form the government. BJP being the party of majority, the party with the most of the seats, 240 as the number. So of course BJP would be having its own share when it comes to the formation of government and when it comes to the ministries and the portfolios. But at the same time, I would like to add here that these coalition parties have already started arriving in Delhi. The new elected parliamentarians of TDP with their chief, they'll be here. Chandrababu Naidu will be accompanying his 16 new elected member of parliament to show the strength and support to this new coalition to form NDA government. But at the same time, as per given by the sources, I would like to add here that all this support and strength would be coming with a long list of demands, as it is said by the sources, that of course being the newly formed state, Andhra Pradesh would be looking up to more and more development in next 5 years, and a lot of support from the center will be required. So of course TDP chief would be keeping all this in mind while asking for the portfolios, as it is said. And same lies with JDU also, Nitish Kumar, because as per his senior leader KC Tyagi has been claiming with his repetitive dialogue with media, he has been saying that they have this prior experience of running railway ministries. So they also have these bigger aspirations when it comes to the portfolios and bigger positions to run the government. So this is the kind of scenario. At the same time, the parties with single seats also have big hopes, be it the Chirag Paswan's party or Eknath Shinde or maybe Jitan Ram Manjhi or Apna Dal by Anupriya Patel also, the parties which are having single member of parliament. They also have bigger aspirations when it comes to the representation in the Modi 3.0 government. So these were the discussions throughout here when it comes to the coalition. And yes, when it comes to the swearing-in ceremony, there have been discussions that on this weekend itself, the swearing-in ceremony, the oath-taking ceremony of the new government will be taking in place. And just to add on here that the oath ceremony for Andhra Pradesh was lined up for 8th of June, and Andhra Pradesh, TDP chief was informed to reschedule that ceremony to 12th of June. So there is a strong chance that the swearing-in ceremony would be taking up place in this coming weekend itself.
All right, Kriti. Thanks a lot for joining us with those updates, that information that you shared. And let's see when exactly the swearing will take place in the shape and form of the Modi 3.0 government. Thanks. Now, the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Council of Ministers for the third straight time will also see what has become a tradition now since 2014 being taken forward. The BJP-led NDA government has believed and acted on the neighbourhood first policy since inception. It has led to leaders of neighbouring nations being invited to attend the grand occasion. Conveying continuity in India's foreign policy, even this time around, leaders from neighbouring countries have been invited with one notable exception.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's neighbourhood first policy was put into action the day he took oath of office for the nation's top executive post, the first time in 2014. All South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation or SAARC leaders were invited for the ceremony. Apart from India, SAARC leaders comprises Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. 5 years later, when the BJP-led NDA got an even bigger mandate from India's voters, leaders of the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation or BIMSTEC were invited for the swearing-in ceremony. Along with India, BIMSTEC has Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka and Thailand. Even in 2024, after getting a third successive mandate to govern the nation, leaders of South Asian countries such as Nepal, Bhutan, Mauritius, Maldives and others have been invited to attend the swearing-in ceremony in the national capital over the weekend. Sri Lanka's President Ranil Wickremesinghe has accepted the Prime Minister's invitation to attend his swearing-in ceremony. Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina also would be travelling to New Delhi for the oath-taking ceremony.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, has invited our Prime Minister, and she has already accepted it and going to join the oath ceremonial program.
Clearly, even before taking over the reins of the nation for a third time by inviting leaders of neighbouring countries for his swearing-in ceremony, Prime Minister Modi has signalled a continuity in his foreign policy, which has been a hallmark of his government since 2014. Bureau Report, DD India.
And let me now take you across to both Dhaka and Colombo to get us more on these visits that have been confirmed by the leaders there. Nawal Singh Parmar from Dhaka joins us and Dr. Ahmed Moin Faruqi from Colombo, both Prasar Bharati correspondents. Good evening to you. Nawal, what in terms of how do you think this invitation has been taken by the leadership of that country, and the response too tells us that they are looking forward to the occasion and working with India in the future course as well for next 5 years at least with Prime Minister Modi and his government?
Well, good evening.
Evening.
As per the updates from the Prime Minister office, Bangladesh Prime Minister's office, that she will leave for New Delhi from Dhaka on Saturday 11 o'clock, and she will be there in New Delhi to take part in the swearing ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his third consecutive term. And as per the update, she received the invitation from the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and accepting and reciprocating the things invitation of the Indian Prime Minister. She immediately decided, and updates came from her office that she will she is eager to take part in the Indian Prime Minister's oath-taking ceremony.
Right. And Dr. Faruqi, if I could also come to you in terms of how India's and Sri Lanka's relations have been ever since Sri Lanka went through a tough time economically and otherwise as well. There was a change of regime too. It was natural for the invitation to be extended and accepted as well. But in terms of the next 5 years that this government will be in power, Modi 3.0, how would this further the ties that are already quite strong between India and Sri Lanka?
Gautam, yes, you see, India has been following this policy, and that has been the hallmark with regard to the regional collaboration that India has been having. Especially if you look at the Indian Ocean region, this is a region where India feels there is a need for more collaboration among all the stakeholders and all the countries of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. While that has been happening on one end, we noticed that India had provided a generous and a huge humanitarian assistance in 2022. You rightly mentioned about the economic crisis which Sri Lanka faced, and since then there have been more collaborative efforts that have been happening between India and Sri Lanka. Now, last year, President Ranil Wickremesinghe visited India. He met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and both leaders came out with a joint vision document, the central theme of which was connectivity. Connectivity was a very important topic for which flight connectivity was restarted between Jaffna and Chennai. In addition to that, between Colombo and Mumbai. Apart from that, ferry services were also started between Nagapattinam and Kangesanturai. Not just this, there are also UPI launch which happened while merging it with Lanka QR in Sri Lanka, and all these have added a huge dimension to the bilateral relations that exist between India and Sri Lanka. Now, this has been considered as the theme that will be taking forward the relations in the period that we call as Amrit Kal. Now, if we are just looking at Modi 3.0, the next 5 years will be a very huge opportunity for further development with more projects coming in, more investments coming in from Indian side. And of course, there are going to be more and more activities with regard to building connectivity, because, Sri Lanka and India share a very strong bond through centuries, in fact, through millennia. And that will be something that we'll be looking forward to, because, we also have seen the Pran Pratishtha, which happened earlier this year. And there was also Kumbhabhishekam at Sita earlier. So there are lots of connectivities with regard to people-to-people contacts as well. Gautam.
Yes, certainly, and that will be further encouraged and enhanced as and when these leaders meet again. That will be for the swearing-in ceremony. We'll have to wait and see if any further one-on-one engagements take place between the invited leaders. But I'm sure those occasions will be quite plentiful in the coming 5 years as well. Thanks a lot for joining us, Nawaz Parbar from Dhaka and Dr. Ahmed Moin Faruqi from Colombo. And still to come on DD India News are: Israel presses on with its bombings in Gaza, targeting the Hamas as Western powers call on both the sides to accept US President Joe Biden's peace plan. The Kremlin says Kyiv's backers will face consequences after President Putin says he may arm the West's enemies. And UK's Labour Party charges Prime Minister Sunak of lying about its plans to tax the people in a televised debate with its leader Keir Starmer.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts, we demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
Welcome back. You're watching the latest on DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday warned of consequences if the US and its allies first keep supplying Ukraine with weapons for direct strikes after the United States and several countries gave a green light to Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia using their armaments. Here's a report.
As several countries, including the United States, have given Ukraine the green light to strike targets inside Russia, the Kremlin has warned Western countries supplying Ukraine with weapons for direct strikes on Russia that they will definitely face consequences. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov was commenting after President Vladimir Putin suggested on Wednesday that he could supply weapons within striking distance of interests associated with the United States and its European allies if they allowed Kiev to strike deeper into Russia with long-range Western weapons.
The president has said what he wanted to say. This very clearly suggests that the supply of weapons that will be fired at us cannot remain without consequences, and these consequences surely will follow.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on Thursday that allies should ensure that gaps in military support to Ukraine are not repeated. Stoltenberg said Ukraine needed predictability and accountability in terms of military support.
The last months we have seen some gaps, some delays in the provision of military support to Ukraine. We need to ensure that that doesn't happen again, and that's the reason why we are now working in NATO on how to establish a NATO mission for Ukraine and also how to agree a long-term financial pledge to ensure that Ukraine gets the predictability and the accountability they need when it comes to military support from NATO allies to Ukraine.
In the ongoing conflict, a fire was extinguished at Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery in Russia's Rostov region following a Ukrainian drone attack. Regional Governor Vasily Golubev said on Thursday Russia and Ukraine are using drones to strike critical infrastructure, military installations and troop concentrations. Amidst these developments, Ukraine's hydropower company Hydroenergo said it has initiated international arbitration seeking damages for Russia's destruction of the Kakhovka Dam and power station in June 2023. The state-run hydroelectric company estimated the damages at 2.5 billion euros. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
Negotiations continue between Israel and Hamas aimed at securing a ceasefire and the release of hostages. Meanwhile, the United States and UK, Canada, Germany and several other countries have called on the Hamas to accept a proposal by US President Joe Biden for a permanent ceasefire in the enclave. Even Israel has been urged to accept the same terms. Let's now take you across live to Tel Aviv. Joining us is DD India Sarah Coates for more on this. Good evening to you, Sarah. What can you tell us first about which way is the fight headed? Israel has again claimed success in hitting the Hamas hard in one of its compounds, which is a UN school. Is it now closer to eliminating the Hamas altogether, which would then end the war?
Good evening. Well, that does remain unclear. Israel has in the past, by some international players, been criticised over what is perceived as a lack of strategy. But we do need to take into account what we've been hearing from senior officials here in Israel over the last week or so. We heard from the National Security Advisor, Zahi Hanegbi. He came out to say that this war in Gaza could go on for at least 7 more months. So it would appear as though Israel's war goals, and this, of course, is defeating Hamas, bringing home these remaining more than 100 Israeli hostages, and making sure that Hamas never poses a threat to the state of Israel again. It appears as though these goals have not yet been achieved. But as you mentioned there are mounting calls for a ceasefire to be implemented in the Strip immediately. The Egyptians have actually just come out, according to a number of sources, saying that right now, with these negotiations ongoing, with this new ceasefire and hostage release proposal on the table, that there are positive signs from Hamas. But we do also need to take into account the past few deals that have been on the table. There's been this one sticking point, that is the end to the war. Hamas says it will only accept a full comprehensive ceasefire, and this is something that the Israelis have said time and time again that they will not accept.
All right, so where does that leave the fight that is going on? Because it's not only just with Hamas, there is the battle in the north as well now, which seems to be escalating with the Hezbollah. And what is really, in terms of the kind of modalities that are being worked out to ensure that at least for starters, there could be a temporary truce which could then perhaps be worked upon further?
You're right about this intensifying in the north, this exchange of fire that has been ongoing between Israel and Hezbollah since the 8th of last month, October, I should say. It is very, very concerning, and there was a lot of hope for a diplomatic breakthrough to try and ease these tensions, with a lot of fear that if indeed Israel does conduct a smaller scale war, which is something that's been talked about over the past few weeks, that this could then really spiral into a larger regional conflict, potentially pulling in Iran, given that Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. So this is certainly very, very concerning. There are reports that the Biden administration has been warning the Israelis against what they're calling a small-scale war, but this certainly looks like something that is becoming extremely possible. I actually just got back from the north a few hours ago. I was just a couple of kilometres from the Lebanese border, and it is an extremely tense situation. We also need to remember that some 60,000 Israelis have been internally displaced from their homes. They cannot go back given this dire security situation, and they're becoming extremely frustrated. They believe the government is not doing enough to help them. They feel abandoned. And we also need to look at the past events over the last few days. You mentioned rocket fire, drones intensifying, and these have been sparking massive fires in the north, some of them which are still burning. So this is certainly very, very concerning, and there is a lot of fear in the international community, as I mentioned, especially within the Biden administration, that an all-out war could be on the cards.
All right. Well, let's hope that things don't get any worse than they already are and move in a different direction altogether. Thanks for joining us for the moment, Sarah Coates. Now, 4 days of voting in the European Parliament election kicked off in the Netherlands on Thursday. Dutch nationalist Here, Wilders has cast his vote. Wilders looked set for new electoral gains as a nationwide opinion poll showed his party in a tie for first place with the Labour and Green Left combination, with both projected to get 8 seats. Now, the election to be held across all 27 EU member states from the 6th to the 9th of this month will have an impact across the European Union and beyond. Polling in the Netherlands will be followed by Ireland and Malta on Friday and Latvia and Slovakia on Saturday. The remaining EU member states will vote on Sunday. Results are expected by Sunday evening local time. 370 million people in all 27 EU member states are eligible to vote. Voters will be selecting 720 members of the European Parliament. Seats are allocated according to each country's population. And let's get you more on this with Alex Kadir getting us this report from Brussels.
Well, certainly these elections are the second biggest democratic exercise, of course, after the Indian elections, those 27 countries going to the polls. And what will happen is that the voters will make national decisions, voting for parties in their countries. But then the big question is, how do those individual parties work together once they get to the European Parliament? They will form these parliamentary groups together in the European Parliament. So the question will be, how will the right-wing parties from the Netherlands, from Italy, from France, from Germany, Spain work together in that Parliament? Ditto for the Greens and the left-wing parties. How will they be able to form coalitions to then be able either to govern or block or have influence in that European Parliament? So you will see those results coming on Sunday evening. All of these countries going on separate days because, as I mentioned, and as you rightly mentioned, 370 million voters across 4 days and across the European Union. The thing to look out for is exactly how much, what the breakdown will be of who gets what proportion of MEPs in the European Parliament, because that will decide who gets the top jobs. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, that building behind me, she's just had a phone call with Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulating him on his election victory. She will be looking very closely at the European elections because the MEPs will decide who is the next President of the European Commission, and crucially that will be a big question for Ursula von der Leyen. The other thing to expect is to see which political direction the continent goes in. The last time we had European elections was back in 2019, before the COVID pandemic, before the invasion of Ukraine, before inflation, before the migration crisis in Europe. It's all to play for in the coming days in Europe.
All right, now Britain's Labour Party has accused Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Wednesday of lying in a pre-election debate when he said that Labour would increase taxes by more than $2,500 per family. Sunak, whose Conservative Party is struggling in opinion polls before the 4th of July elections, used the figure repeatedly in Tuesday's television debate with opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer. Starmer made the comments in Portsmouth, where both Sunak and him visited as part of the Second World War D-Day commemoration. Starmer said that he stood by Vaughan Githin, leader of the semi-autonomous Welsh government, who lost a non-binding vote of confidence on Wednesday.
We've been very clear throughout that all of our plans are fully costed and fully funded. And that means no tax rises for working people. And I'll spell that out. No income tax, no national insurance, no VAT. What you saw last night was a Prime Minister with his back against the wall, desperately trying to defend 14 years of failure, resorting, and it was a flash of his character, an insight into his character, to lies.
And let's now take a look at some other stories that are making news around the world as well. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong on Thursday said that her country seeks to deepen diplomatic ties with a specific neighbour of the Solomon Islands. This comes in the event of China competing for stronger presence on the island nation. China has a policing presence under a pact signed between the two countries in 2022. A tram crash in the Russian city of Kemerovo in southwest Siberia killed one person on Thursday morning. Russia's Interfax news agency said in its report that up to 102 people had been injured after the runaway tram crashed into others further down the line. In his first state visit to Brazil, Croatia's President Zoran Milanovic met with Croatian community in Sao Paulo on Wednesday. He also met with his host and counterpart, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. It was the first meeting between the two leaders of these two countries since the establishment of diplomatic ties in 1992. India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Santosh Jha, formally inaugurated a Yoga Mahotsav at Swami Vivekanand Cultural Centre in Colombo ahead of International Day of Yoga. The 10-day-long Yoga Mahotsav will be held from the 13th to the 22nd of this month in different iconic locations in Sri Lanka. And still to come up on DD India News Hour, we'll be speaking with our expert guest about what the invitation to leaders from neighbouring countries for PM Modi's third upcoming swearing-in ceremony means for India's diplomacy and standing around the world. The 26th Hindu Yatra commences in Leh, Ladakh, marking a decade and a half of spiritual pilgrimage initiated by L.K. Advani. And India's health ministry boasts summer preparedness, heat wave and hospital fire prevention measures prioritized with comprehensive emergency response plan.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy, and before we go any further, another look at our top stories. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to be sworn in over the weekend for a landmark third time. Leaders from neighbouring nations are invited for the ceremony. The Netherlands kicks off the 27-nation European Union elections on Thursday, which will go on till the 9th of June. It's a crucial pole battle in the ascent of the far-right forces in Europe. And let's now talk about what's really happening over the weekend, which is the swearing in for the third time of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP-led NDA government. The alliance once again winning the elections, getting past the majority mark, and that is happening, something that is happening in 60 years, the third time that a successive government will be sworn in and will be in power in India. And for this particular event, what has happened is that once again neighbouring countries' leaders have been invited to take part, and many of them have also confirmed that they will be arriving in India's capital, Delhi, to be part of that ceremony, the swearing-in ceremony. To talk about it, we have with us Pinak Ranjan Chakrabarti, former Secretary ER in the Ministry of External Affairs and a former senior diplomat as well. Good evening to you, Mr. Chakrabarti. What do you make of this tradition that seems to have been established now since 2014, the third time now that leaders from the neighbouring countries have been invited, and many of them have already confirmed that they will be taking part in that ceremony to witness this landmark occasion?
Well, it is, I think, the sign-up and outreach towards our neighbors which is part of our neighborhood first policy. And hence, I think this is being repeated, and I would say that this was entirely expected, and this should be this is practice that is being set by India, and hopefully this will create a much more closeness with our neighbors, and also the fact that the other neighbors, if they wish, to emulate this practice, then it will become a South Asian kind of a practice, which is a good thing, because as we see in Europe, for example, in the European Union, there are a lot of these kind of gatherings that takes place on these kind of occasions. So I think this is absolutely, I welcome it wholeheartedly, because I think this creates an atmosphere of good neighborliness and helps in promoting and sort of managing our bilateral ties with all these.
Certainly. Since 2014 that this process or this tradition was set, how do you assess the progress of India's ties with some of these neighboring countries, the leaders of which have been invited now for the third time as well for the swearing in?
Your question would take a very long time to answer, but to be
I request you to kind of sum it up a bit.
But to be brief, I think it's fair to say that there's been ups and downs, because bilateral ties also depend on what is happening in the other country. If you say that, it's not a constant, it's not a static thing, that you try to improve, but on the other side there are changes that restrict or impede those improvements. But I would in a general sense say, and if one has to generalize, that we have been trying very hard to improve our relations with our neighbors. As I said, it depends on their own domestic and other issues, their political discourses, and who is in power.
Let me just narrow it down for you and make it a little easier, because we have countries here like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. We've had exemplary relations with them, and then we also have countries, again, a country whose leader has been invited and has accepted the invite, where there have been hiccups as well. And I'm not talking about Pakistan here, I'm talking about an island nation. Could you hear me? I just wanted to ask you that there's a bit of a contrast even in the ties. There's a difference because there are countries who've been invited, their leaders have been invited, where we have excellent ties really, but there are others and not Pakistan in this case, Pakistan not invited this time around. There are others like an island nation where there have been hiccups not of our making, and yet we're still working on improving ties.
Well, this is the result of geopolitics, and I would dare say that we have to identify that what is the cause. And I have no hesitation to say that the cause is China, because China's hegemonic designs in our Asia and in our region is becoming more and more apparent in terms of its dealings with our neighbors. So we have a challenge here, and we have to deal with it. But then these are also, I would say, not permanent, in the sense that regimes change. Elections can throw up a new government in in our neighborhood, and then the whole thing changes, and then we'll have to deal with those changes, and obviously keep our powder dry in terms of dealing with such change. So yes, you are right that some things have not been acceptable, or I would say not really in our favor in some places. But then there are other leverages that India has with these countries, which will come to bear when bilateral ties, are put to the test.
Certainly. And apart from that, we've seen how almost leaders of 100 nations have sent in their congratulations, spoken to Prime Minister Modi over the phone, and if it's on social media, then the PM has also reverted to their greetings, and the sense of really continuity that one is really looking at in terms of taking ties forward, be they at bilateral or even multilateral or grouping levels. What do you think, how does that augur for India's standing in the globe in the coming years?
I think one thing that India has demonstrated via this election is that it's such a vibrant democracy. It's the largest democracy in the world. It's 900 million people voting. No other country in the world can imagine this kind of organizational ability to enable people to cast their votes. And yes, I would say that people have already congratulated Prime Minister Modi upon his third term in office, unprecedented since the days of Jawaharlal Nehru. And I think this is, you're on the cusp of creating history. The sense that the third term will certainly give the opportunity to Prime Minister Modi to enable or implement the long-term policies that he has in mind. And that is what I expect him to do. There will be constraints because he'll be working in a coalition. So coalition, pressures will operate. But that is domestic, and I would say that in the economic and international spheres, there will be continuity, and we need to do the economic reforms that Mr. Modi has initiated, and that has to be carried forward. But of course, in the coalition, there will be demands on the government in Italy that for favors or whatever. I mean, in terms of handouts for the states, etc. Now, how that really works out and how the government deals with it is, of course, a matter of speculation.
Certainly. Well, we'll have to wait and see how things move along. At least as far as external affairs is concerned, there is a sense of continuity even otherwise, even when regimes change. Here, it's just the same government that will be taking things forward, come whenever the swearing-in takes place and the government then starts functioning. Thanks a lot for joining us, Pinakiran Chakrabarti, for your views on what is happening in terms of building ties that have been established through the course of the last 10 years and taking them forward, starting with the neighborhood. Let's now take a look at some of the other updates that are coming in from around the country as well. Well, India's Chief Election Commissioner Rajiv Kumar, Election Commissioners Ganesh Kumar and Sukhbir Singh Sandhu on Thursday signed what is known as a due constitution notification of newly elected lawmakers and handed it over to President Draupadi Murmu. The 26th Sindhu Yatra has begun at Leh in the Union Territory of Ladakh on Thursday. The Yatra means a journey in Hindi. India's then Deputy Prime Minister L.K. Advani started the Yatra in 2008, and it's part of the culture and tradition of the region now, and thousands of people, lakhs of people really gather there to take part in this holy event. Indian delegation led by Secretary Department of Commerce Sunil Bhartwal participated in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, that's the IPEF ministerial meeting held in Singapore on Thursday. IPEF members signed agreements to address 21st century challenges and bolstering economic engagement across a critical region. India's Health Ministry on Thursday reviewed, along with the states, the heat wave situation and measures to prevent hospital fires during summer months. The ministry set up an emergency response plan with the SOPs for evacuating patients, staff and visitors in untoward event of a fire. And still to come on DD India News Hour, Peru becomes the first South American country to adopt India's UPI system. World leaders applaud veterans at different D-Day events. And Australia crush Oman in a Group B match of the T20 World Cup.
The construction sector generates waste, causes air pollution and also contaminates water. It really harms our environment. But there are ways to make this sector more sustainable. So let's look at some ideas to build green.
We begin every project by searching for reclaimed wood or stones from old houses. Working with reclaimed material also requires a lot of skill and experience.
Mud bricks are made of nothing but mud and 8% stabilizer. We now add a bit of lime and cement, but 92% is mud.
The distance between the elevators and the windows, that's great. A lot of office buildings actually have way too much space between the elevators and the glazing to make that happen.
The living root bridges has to be protected because we retain the imprints of our forefathers who has taught us how to use the natural resources without destroying the Mother Earth.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, India's robust digital payment ecosystem, UPI or Unified Payments Interface System, is attracting worldwide attention. Peru has become the first South American country to adopt India's UPI system. India's NPCI, that is National Payments Corporation of India Limited, and the Central Reserve Bank of Peru have announced a partnership to enable the deployment of UPI-like real-time payment system in Peru. This strategic partnership empowers Peru's BCRP to establish a reliable and efficient real-time payments platform within the country. Dozens of US World War II veterans were honored on Thursday during a ceremony in Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The ceremony was attended by world leaders as well as celebrity guests, including American actor Tom Hanks and Oscar-winning director Steven Spielberg, because they made that movie Saving Private Ryan. Now, some 200 veterans, I beg your pardon, most of them American or British, took part in the ceremonies on beaches that still bear the scars of the fighting that erupted on D-Day. World leaders also paid tribute to the veterans and pledged to continue to stand for democracy. South African Party African National Congress leaders held talks on Thursday to try to agree on potential partners to form a new South African government. South Africa's long-governing party, the African National Congress, has said it's looking at all options to form a new government after losing its parliamentary majority in a historic election last week. The announcement was made by the party's Secretary General hours before its National Executive Committee was due to meet. DD India's Chris Okamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Senior officials of the African National Congress Party are holding talks about sharing power. The development follows the party's loss of its parliamentary majority in South Africa's election late last month. The party garnered 40.2% of the vote, down from 57.5% in 2019. The ANC's closest challenger, the Democratic Alliance, got 21.8% of the vote. Talks between them are likely to be tough because of the criticism that the leaders of the Democratic Alliance have been leveling at the ANC. The ANC Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, told journalists that President Cyril Ramaphosa will announce the decision reached by the National Executive Committee after their meeting. South Africa is one of the continent's most developed countries, but it has some of the world's highest unemployment rates. The ANC accepted the outcome of the polls last week, describing it as the strength of the country's democracy. Chris Ochamringa in Kinshasa for DD India.
Sri Lanka's National Dengue Control Unit has sounded an alert on the possibility of a dengue outbreak on the island nation, which is facing rains and floods. Speaking to media persons, Director of National Dengue Control Unit, Dr. Sudat Samravira said that while the country has managed to keep the cases to under 25,000 in the current year, the number may rise according to previous experience. A decade ago, CPEC promised to be a game changer for Pakistan with Gwadar port as its centerpiece. Today, the port sits deserted and the project faces accusations of dead-trap diplomacy. With doubts clouding its future, will the CPEC ever deliver on its grand vision? Jessica Taneja has the details.
A decade ago, a shimmering vision of prosperity emerged. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. Gwadar Port, the crown jewel of this plan, was touted as a game changer. Today, a different reality unfolds. Gwadar, a natural deep-water harbour brimming with potential, lies eerily deserted. Promises of a $1.6 billion expansion have evaporated, leaving the port underdeveloped. Roads and railways, the lifeblood of trade, are conspicuously absent. In its best year, Gwadar witnessed a paltry 22 ships, a stark contrast to the bustling activity of Karachi's harbour. The rot runs deep. Political instability casts a long shadow over Pakistan, threatening to snuff out the dream of CPEC. Whispers of debt-trap diplomacy cloud the project, with concerns that China is reaping an unfair share of benefits. While Gwadar generates barely a trickle of income, a staggering 90% goes to the Chinese operator, leaving Pakistan with a meager 10%.
We would like to have a different dialogue this time with our great friend China to have investments in feasible projects, promote B2B dialogue, and transform CPEC into a new level.
The initial euphoria surrounding CPEC, a project with a colossal $46 billion price tag, has significantly waned. Reports suggest only $25 billion worth of projects materialized. Did China miscalculate?
There is much more strategic conception behind the port than purely commercial, despite Pakistan making efforts to pitch it as a commercial port. And therefore, even this whole Malacca dilemma, and whether it's an alternative for China, falls flat in this regard, because to transport goods, you certainly can't do it with oil. To transport it all the way through the hills into Xinjiang and then transport it to the energy centers of China is just totally uneconomical.
With a mere fraction of the promised funds spent, critical questions loom. Will CPEC regain momentum, or will it fade into insignificance?
Gwadar, as the end point of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is a good investment. It's a great investment which can be exploited. Its currency is nothing very much, and its importance is nothing very much at the moment. But in the years to come, this area of the northwest South Arabian Sea, or what is called the Indian Ocean area, is going to be of prime importance, because this is the area through which energy is going to go. This is the area through which China's trade will continue.
As initial enthusiasm wanes and doubts over China's motives rise, only time will tell if Gwadar will ever fulfill its destiny as a thriving port. Jessica Taneja for DD India.
And let's now get you quick sports updates as well. An all-round show from Marcus Stoinis helped Australia clinch a 39-run victory over Oman in their Group B match of the T20 World Cup on Thursday. Asked to bat first, Australia posted 164 for 5 in 20 overs, with Stoinis scoring 56 and 67 runs. Meanwhile, David Warner, in his final tournament before retirement, compiled 56 of 51 balls before falling in the penultimate over. The Roos produced a dominating bowling performance as they restricted Oman to 125 for 9. For Australia, Stoinis scalped 3 wickets, while Mitchell Starc, Adam Zampa and Nathan Ellis scalped 2 wickets each. In tennis, Rohan Bopanna and Matthew Ebden failed to go through to the final of the French Open 2024 men's doubles after crashing out in the semi-finals on Thursday. The Indo-Australian pair lost to the Italian duo of Simone Bolelli and Andrea Vavasori 5-7, 6-2, 2-6 in an hour and 58 minutes. It was the same opponent Bopana and Ebden defeated in the Australian Open final back in January at the Rod Laver Arena. And that's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X as well as Instagram. We'll be back with more news and breaks here on DD India. This is how you can download the mobile app of DD India as well. And from all of us here for the moment in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.